Welcome to Mi K'Amcha Yisrael. In our parasha, the Torah presents something striking, a list of blessings and then a much longer list of detailed curses. It feels almost unbalanced. Why are the kilalot so specific and so numerous while the berachot are described so generally? And there's a powerful insight brought down by Rabbi Baruch Halevi Epstein, and he explains, a blessing and a curse doesn't function the same way. A blessing is like a jug filled with wine. You can have wealth, you can have health, and you can have family. But if there's even a small crack in that jug, slowly, quietly, everything leaks out. A person can have money, but no peace, health and no joy, family, but no connection. And suddenly he doesn't feel blessed at all. Because blessings only feel like blessings when they come together. A full life is not one of powerful success. It's a life where everything works in harmony. But suffering doesn't cancel itself out. It compounds. One pain doesn't replace another, it adds to it. And then another and yet another. And that's why the Torah details the curses so precisely, because each one is its own world. But the berachot, when they're there, you have everything that you need. And then here's the part that matters most. Sometimes life hands a person a crack, a moment that threatens to define everything, a diagnosis, lo aleinu, a loss, a fear that overshadows everything else. And in that moment, a person can begin to feel like his entire life is just that crack. But that's not the only way to live, because a person has the ability to expand his life beyond the crack, to rebuild a life that's bigger than the pain. And sometimes the greatest turning point in a person's life comes not when the crack disappears, but when he refuses to live inside of it. Let me share a story with you. It was a difficult time. The world felt unstable. People were carrying pain, national pain, personal pain. And in Bnei Brak, here in Israel, a yeshiva was in the middle of building a new structure. They had outgrown their space. Construction had begun. There was a momentum, there was a vision, and then everything stopped. Workers disappeared, material sat untouched. What should have been noise became silence, and they found a solution. Jewish workers stepped to continue the job even at a greater cost, but they needed someone experienced, someone who understood how to run a site. So they called a contractor, a very capable man. He was experienced, he was practical. He agreed to come regularly and oversee this particular project, not for money, but for the yeshiva. At first, everything was moving again. Dust was in the air. Voices were calling out progress. As he was set to enter this beginning of it, focused, sharp, and controlled, but after a few weeks, something shifted. His posture changed. His movement slowed. There was a heaviness to him that wasn't there before, and then he shared it. He had gone to a specialist, and after tests and after scans, the doctor looked at him and said, Lo aleinu, within 6 months, bar minan, you will be paralyzed. No cure, no treatment, and no way to stop it. And in that moment, his entire life collapsed into one point. One sentence, one fear, one overwhelming reality. Everything else faded. The next morning, he walked back onto the construction site, and he went back to work, guiding, fixing, building, not his health, not his future, someone else's future, because he had made a decision: I will not let this become my whole life. And then it happened. A sudden slip, he fell from a shelf, a hard fall, his body hit the ground, tools scattered, dust rose into the air, and for a split second, everything stopped, because everyone understood that this was the worst possible moment for a fall like this. They rushed toward him, he didn't move. And then slowly he pushed himself up. He stood there, still, one hand pressed firmly against his back, waiting. No one spoke a word. It was total silence. And then something changed. A flicker crossed his face. Confusion. He shifted slightly, moved again. The pain was gone. It wasn't lighter. It wasn't reduced. It was gone. He stood there almost searching for it, as if something that had been screaming inside of him had suddenly gone silent. The next day he returned to the doctor, the same office, the same reality, or at least it should have been. The doctor studied the scan, paused, looked again, and then said the words he never says, I don't understand. Everything was normal, but that's not where the story begins. The story began the day before. Ladies and gentlemen, we think life breaks in the moment that hurt, but that's not where it happens. Life breaks when everything becomes that moment. One fear, one diagnosis, one crack takes over the entire picture. That's when the jug empties. But look at what this man did. At the very moment his life collapsed into one point, he refused to live there. He didn't fix the crack. He didn't solve the problem, nor change the diagnosis. He did something far more powerful. He made his life bigger than it. And sometimes you don't just see this in one person. You see it in thousands. This year, we had the privilege to be in Meron for the Hilula of the Tanai Elokai Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. People were told, you can't come. Roads were shut. Access was restricted. Permits almost impossible to get. And then the rain came. Not a drizzle, a downpour, hour after hour through the day, through the night, and still they came. Some drove until the roads ended, and they kept going on foot. Others left their cars miles away by Gush Chalav and they walked. They had mud that pulled at their feet, through water so close, through their clothing, fathers pushing, carrying strollers through the forest, mothers holding children close, families walking together in the dark, in the cold, in the rain. Some climbed through the mountains, some found paths, others took chances and not even knowing if they would ever be allowed in. And when they attempted to reach the gate, there was no promise. There was no certainty. Maybe yeah, they'd get in and maybe no. And still, they forged ahead because something inside them said, this is worth everything. To stand there, to whisper a tefillah, to feel close even for a moment. They weren't running from something. They were running towards something. And no barrier, no rain, and no uncertainty was going to define the story. That's what it looks like when a person refuses to let the obstacle become the whole story. They didn't just protect their lives, they transformed them, because when a person expands beyond the pain, he creates a life that the pain can no longer contain. And sometimes, in ways we will never understand, that is exactly where the Leolam responds. Not when everything is perfect, but when a person refuses to let the imperfection define him. Because a crack only empties a life that has nothing else holding it together. But a life that's full of purpose, of giving, of meaning, doesn't leak, it overflows. And that is the definitive difference between having blessings and living a life that is truly blessed. Shabbat Shalom Mivorach.